You know, I have to be honest with you. When I first heard that my refrigerator, this box that's supposed to keep my family safe and my food fresh, might actually be silently destroying my health every single day, I thought it was just another internet rumor. I mean, come on, a refrigerator ruining my health. It sounded like one of those overblown scare tactics. But then I dug deeper. I started reading the research. I started comparing my own experiences with what scientists had been saying for decades. And let me tell you something, it shook me to my core. Because what I found is this 9 everyday foods that most seniors like you and me are still tossing into the fridge without thinking twice, are actually being stripped of their nutrients, turned toxic, or transformed into breeding grounds for bacteria. And here's the chilling part. Over 99% of people over 60 are still refrigerating these foods, not realizing the hidden toll it takes on their gut, their heart, their memory, and even their brain health. It's not just about food going stale or tasting funny, no. This is about chemical reactions, structural breakdowns, and even genetic changes inside the food we eat. Think about that. The very same foods could be protecting us from heart disease, dementia, and digestive issues are being rendered useless or worse, harmful because of cold storage. Now, I know what you're thinking. Alright, maybe I'll lose a little taste. Maybe my bread gets a little harder, what's the big deal? Well, what if I told you that by refrigerating certain foods, you're literally creating carcinogens? Or that you're cutting away 90% of life-saving antioxidants? Or that you're making your immune system weaker every single morning at breakfast without even knowing it? And here's the kicker, some scientists believe our modern obsession with refrigeration may be one of the hidden reasons behind the explosion of chronic illnesses in seniors today. So today, we're going to uncover the truth together. I'm going to reveal to you, one by one, the 9 foods you should never refrigerate. And I promise you, by the time we get to number 2, you're going to be absolutely floored. Because it's something you've been doing your whole life without knowing the damage it was doing inside your body. And don't worry, I'm not just here to scare you. I'll also give you the exact right way to store these foods safely so that you protect their nutrients, their taste, and your health. So grab a cup of tea, sit back, and let's start with the one that fooled me for decades: potatoes. Number 9. Potatoes, the silent poison in your pantry. Alright, confession time. For most of my life, I kept my potatoes in the bottom drawer of my refrigerator. You know, that little crisper drawer where most people shove their onions, potatoes, carrots, all that good stuff. But here's the problem. When you put potatoes in the fridge, you're not just storing them wrong. You're literally turning them into something toxic. Here's why. Potatoes are full of starch. That's what gives them that fluffy texture when you mash them, that golden crisp when you fry them. But in cold temperatures, something happens called cold-induced sweetening. Sounds harmless, right? Sweet potatoes, anyone. But no. What actually happens is those starches convert into sugars at a rapid pace. And when you cook those sweetened potatoes, whether you're baking, frying, or roasting them, those sugars react with amino acids to form acrylamide. Now, I don't want to get too technical here, but listen carefully. The International Agency for Research on Cancer classifies acrylamide as a probable human carcinogen, meaning it's strongly linked to cancer. So every time you make French fries or hash browns out of refrigerated potatoes, you're potentially creating a toxic chemical inside your food. And this isn't just theory. A University of Idaho study tested over 500 potato samples and found that potatoes stored at refrigerator temperatures showed a 300% increase in sugar content in just 2 weeks. That's triple the sugar, just from sitting in the fridge. And if you've ever wondered why your mashed potatoes sometimes taste a little gritty, overly sweet, or just off, that's exactly why. The cold is literally destroying them at the cellular level. So what's the fix? Simple. Store your potatoes in a cool, dark place like a pantry, cellar, or even a cardboard box in your closet. The temperature sweet spot is between 45 and 50 degrees Fahrenheit. And here's a pro tip. Never store potatoes near onions. Why? Because both release gases that make the other spoil faster. Keep them at least 3 feet apart. Do this right, and your potatoes can last up to 3 months. Stick them in the fridge, and they're ruined in 2 weeks. Number 8. Bread. Why your sandwiches taste like cardboard? Now this one blew my mind. Because like most people, I thought putting bread in the refrigerator was a smart way to keep it fresh longer. Turns out, it's the opposite. Refrigeration actually makes your bread go stale 6 times faster. Here's the science. Bread contains starch molecules. When it's baked, those starches are gelatinized, giving bread its soft texture. But when you refrigerate bread, those starch molecules begin to recrystallize, a process called starch retrogradation. In plain English, the bread becomes hard, crumbly, and tasteless. A study by the Institute of Food Technologists measured this and found that bread stored at refrigerator temperatures went stale in just 3 days. Bread stored at room temperature lasted a full week. And here's the part most people miss. The refrigerator also destroys the flavor compounds in bread. Those wonderful, warm, fresh-baked aromas. They're made up of volatile organic compounds that break down in the cold, which is why refrigerated bread ends up tasting like, you guessed it, cardboard. So what's the right way? Store bread at room temperature in a bread box or paper bag. Something that allows a little air circulation so mold doesn't grow, but enough humidity to keep it soft. And here's my personal trick. If you can't finish a loaf within a week, slice it first and freeze it. Freezing actually preserves bread better than refrigeration. Then, when you're ready, take a slice straight from the freezer to the toaster. Don't thaw it first. That's when moisture problems start. I've done this for years now, and I'll tell you it tastes almost as good as fresh baked every time. Number 7. Honey, from ancient treasure to modern mistake. Now, if there's one food that feels like it came straight from heaven, it's honey. Did you know archaeologists have found jars of honey in Egyptian tombs that were over 3,000 years old and still perfectly edible? Honey is one of nature's few foods that literally never spoils. But here's the tragedy. Put it in your refrigerator, and you'll ruin it in weeks. Cold temperatures cause honey to crystallize rapidly. Instead of that smooth golden liquid, you get a grainy, hard mess that won't dissolve properly. Worse, every time you open a cold honey jar, condensation forms inside. And moisture is honey's worst enemy. A study by the National Honey Board found that honey stored below 50 degrees Fahrenheit loses up to 35% of its antimicrobial properties. That's the stuff that makes honey such a powerful natural antibiotic, the same reason ancient civilizations used it to treat wounds. And that beautiful, complex flavor. Honey has over 180 compounds that give it its taste. Cold storage breaks them down unevenly, leaving your expensive raw honey tasting like cheap syrup. So how do you store it? Simple. Keep honey at room temperature in a tightly sealed jar. The sweet spot is 60 to 75 degrees Fahrenheit. Keep it away from sunlight, and it'll last practically forever. And here's something most people don't know. The darker the honey, the more antioxidants it contains. But refrigeration damages dark honey more than light honey. So if you've been buying that rich, dark buckwheat honey for its health benefits, the fridge is literally destroying what you paid for. If your honey does crystallize, don't throw it out. Just place the jar in warm water and stir gently. It'll go back to liquid form without losing its benefits. Alright, so we've already uncovered how your fridge is secretly sabotaging your potatoes, your bread, and even your honey. That alone shocked me. But I'll be honest with you, the next 3 foods hit me even harder. Because these are things I personally relied on almost every single day of my life. Coffee in the morning, garlic in just about every meal I cook, and bananas. Well, they were practically my go-to snack for energy. But once I discovered what refrigeration really does to them, I knew I had to completely change my habits. And I promise, by the end of this section, you're going to look at these foods in a whole new light. Number 6. Coffee, the silent flavor killer. Let me start with a question. Have you ever poured yourself a fresh cup of coffee at home, taken that first sip, and thought, why doesn't this taste like the one from the cafe? You might blame your coffee maker, your water, even the brand of beans. But the real culprit might actually be your refrigerator. See, coffee is one of the most delicate foods on the planet. Those beans may look tough and solid, but they're actually incredibly porous, like little sponges. And guess what's inside your fridge? Smells. Lots of them. Leftover Chinese takeout, that half-open jar of pickles, maybe even some stinky cheese in the back corner. Every time you put coffee in your refrigerator, those beans absorb those odors. And that's why, when you brew your morning cup, it tastes weird. But odor absorption is just the beginning. The bigger danger is moisture. Every time you open that refrigerator door, warm air rushes in, condensation forms on your coffee, and those tiny drops of moisture trigger premature aging of the beans. Moisture is like kryptonite for coffee. It makes the oils inside go rancid faster, and in some cases, even grow mold. A study from the Specialty Coffee Association found that refrigerated beans lose 60% of their aromatic compounds within just 1 week. 60% gone in 7 days. That's why your coffee stops smelling rich and starts smelling flat. And it gets worse. The oils inside coffee beans, those golden, aromatic oils that carry most of the flavor, actually solidify in cold temperatures. So when you grind cold beans, those oils don't extract properly in hot water. The result? Weak, bitter, lifeless coffee. I'll never forget the first time I learned this. A friend of mine who runs a coffee shop pulled me aside and said, "Man, stop putting your beans in the fridge. You're ruining them." He handed me a bag of beans that had never seen the inside of a refrigerator, and I brewed them the next morning. The difference was night and day. So what's the solution? Simple. Store your coffee in an airtight, opaque container at room temperature. Light and oxygen are the two other enemies of coffee, so you want to keep it in a dark place, somewhere between 60 and 70 degrees Fahrenheit. And here's another pro tip. Don't buy giant bags unless you can finish them in 2 weeks. Fresh is always better. Now, some people ask me, what about the freezer? Well, freezing can work, but only if you do it right. Divide your coffee into small, airtight portions. Freeze them once, and only thaw what you need. Never refreeze. Otherwise, you'll end up with the same moisture problem. Trust me on this one. If you've been keeping your coffee in the fridge, change this one habit, and you'll rediscover what coffee was meant to taste like. Number 5. Garlic, from superfood to silent threat. Now, this one's personal for me. Garlic is one of my favorite ingredients. I grew up with my mom tossing garlic into just about every dish: soups, sauces, stir-fries, you name it. And as I got older, I started learning about its health benefits: lowering blood pressure, supporting heart health, fighting off colds. But here's the kicker: if you store garlic in the refrigerator, you're not just dulling its flavor. You might actually be turning it into something dangerous. Let me explain. Garlic is full of a compound called allicin. That's the magic stuff. It's what gives garlic its sharp smell, its medicinal properties, and all those heart protective effects seniors like us rely on. But the moment garlic goes into the fridge, allicin starts breaking down fast. Research from the University of California, Davis, found that garlic stored in cold, moist environments loses 50% of its allicin in just 10 days. Half of its health power gone in a week and a half. But that's not the worst part. Cold, moist environments like your fridge also encourage mold growth. And here's the scary truth: some of those molds produce mycotoxins, which are toxic compounds that can harm your liver and even increase cancer risk. Ever noticed garlic starting to sprout green shoots in the fridge? That's a sign it's breaking down. Those sprouts taste bitter, can upset your stomach, and they're proof the bulb is losing its strength. And the texture? Forget about it. Refrigerated garlic turns mushy. Try mincing it, and it just sticks to your knife, turning into paste. Cooking with it becomes frustrating. So, what's the right way? Store garlic at room temperature in a dry, well-ventilated space. A mesh bag, a basket, or even a simple paper bag works. The ideal temperature is around 60–65 degrees Fahrenheit. And here's a golden rule: garlic needs to breathe. Never put it in plastic or sealed containers. That traps moisture, which speeds up decay. Keep it away from sunlight and heat, like near your stove, because that'll make it sprout faster. If stored properly, a whole head of garlic can last up to 6 months. Once you break it apart, though, you'll want to use the cloves within 10 days. And here's a cooking tip I swear by: always use garlic at room temperature. Cold garlic doesn't release its oils properly, but room temp garlic, the flavor blooms beautifully. The first time I tried this, I made a simple garlic butter pasta, and I swear to you, it tasted like a dish from a 5-star Italian restaurant. The flavor was that much more vibrant. So do yourself a favor: keep garlic out of the fridge, and let it be the superfood it was meant to be. Number 4. Bananas. Why cold turns them black and useless. Now, let's talk about bananas. I know so many seniors who swear by bananas as their go-to fruit. They're easy to digest, full of potassium for your heart and muscles, and give you that quick burst of energy in the morning. But if you've ever tossed bananas into the fridge, you know what happens. Within days, the skin turns black, the fruit goes mushy, and before you know it, they're in the trash. But here's what most people don't realize: it's not just about appearances. Refrigerating bananas actually destroys their nutritional value. Bananas are tropical fruits. In nature, they never experience cold. So when you put them in the refrigerator, their cells literally go into shock. Scientists call this chilling injury. The cold ruptures their cell membranes, enzymes leak out, and the fruit begins to break down from the inside. A study from the Queensland Department of Agriculture found that bananas stored below 56 degrees Fahrenheit lose 80% of their vitamin C within 5 days. 80% gone. And not only that, but refrigeration halts the natural ripening process. Normally, as bananas ripen, they keep producing beneficial compounds, antioxidants, phytochemicals, things that help fight disease. But in the fridge, that process stops dead. Those black spots on the peel, they're not just ugly. They're literally patches of dead tissue where the fruit's natural defenses have failed. And here's the scary part: those areas can become breeding grounds for bacteria and mold, even before you see it. So, how should you store bananas? At room temperature, ideally between 56 and 70 degrees Fahrenheit. Hang them on a banana hook to prevent bruising. Bananas produce ethylene gas, which helps them ripen. Hanging them allows that gas to circulate naturally. And here's a neat trick I learned. If you want to speed up ripening, put bananas in a paper bag with an apple. The apple releases ethylene too, doubling the effect. If you want to slow down ripening, separate the bananas from the bunch and wrap each stem in plastic wrap. That reduces ethylene release by up to 40%. Now, what if your bananas ripen too quickly? Here's the good news. You can refrigerate them briefly once they're already ripe. The skin will turn black, but the inside stays okay for a day or two. Or better yet, peel and freeze them. Frozen bananas are actually a game changer. Toss them into a blender, and you'll get a creamy smoothie that tastes like ice cream without needing any added sugar. I've been making frozen banana smoothies for years now, and I'll tell you, it's the healthiest dessert you'll ever eat. Onions, tomatoes, avocados. There is a strange thing about our habits, especially in American kitchens. Sometimes the most familiar, closest foods become silent traps for health. I have seen this repeated in dozens of families of friends and neighbors in Texas, Kansas, and even in the Ohio suburbs where I live. We buy foods because we believe they are good for us, but then store them incorrectly, and then they turn around and harm our bodies. In this section, I want to tell you about 3 seemingly harmless foods: onions, tomatoes, and avocados. Onions, and stories in cold basements. If you have ever visited a house in the Midwest, especially one with a large basement, you will easily see onions hanging in a mesh bag or lying in a dark corner. It is believed that if you keep onions in a cool place, they will last for weeks, even months. My grandmother in Kansas used to do the same. She would buy a whole bag of onions at the farmer's market, bring them home, and stuff them in the basement, thinking that the cold winter would keep them fresh. But the truth is not as sweet as the scent of fried onions on a pan. Many times, when I went down to the basement to get some onions, I found that the outer layers still looked dry, but the insides had begun to soften and mold. One time, I even found a layer of white mold around the stems. We had unwittingly allowed the onions to become a breeding ground for bacteria and mold without even realizing it. Food experts in the US have warned many times that onions, when cut or exposed, easily absorb moisture and bacteria from the air. If cut onions are left in the refrigerator without being covered, they become bacteria magnets. And worse, bacteria can produce toxins, causing digestive disorders, stomach aches, and even long-term liver damage. I always remember the story of a family friend in Oklahoma. They had a habit of cutting an onion, using half for salad, and then leaving the other half in the refrigerator. Just a few days later, they used that onion to stir-fry meat. The result? The whole family had to be hospitalized for mild poisoning. Luckily, no one was in critical condition, but it was a wake-up call. From then on, they absolutely never left cut onions in the refrigerator overnight. Here's a little tip I learned from American chefs. If you need to store cut onions, put them in a sealed glass container or Ziploc bag, and use them within 24 hours. As for whole onions, keep them in a cool, dry place, away from sunlight and away from potatoes, because the ethylene gas from potatoes will make onions spoil faster. But, not everyone is willing to do it right. In many garages and pantries in the US, bags of onions sit there only to be thrown away a few weeks later. A waste that is both dangerous and heartbreaking. Tomatoes, and the truth behind the disappearing flavor. Tomatoes, for Americans, are an indispensable part of the dining table, from thin slices in a burger at McDonald's to ripe red fruits in a salad at an Italian restaurant, or even just a bowl of spicy salsa to dip nachos. I used to think tomatoes were an innocent food. There was nothing wrong with them. But then I realized the biggest mistake many American families make is how they store tomatoes. We often buy a whole box of tomatoes at Walmart or Costco, then mindlessly put them in the refrigerator. This habit is so common that almost everyone does it. I used to do it too. But one day, while eating a tomato picked straight from my neighbor James's garden in Ohio, I noticed a completely different flavor. It was sweet, fragrant, plump, and seemed to have a hint of sunshine in every clove. Meanwhile, the tomatoes I kept in the refrigerator were bland, mushy, and flavorless. Later, I learned that tomatoes lose their flavor-producing enzymes when stored below 50 degrees Fahrenheit 10 degrees Celsius. That means once you put them in the refrigerator, the process is almost irreversible. Not only do they lose flavor, they also lose lycopene, a powerful antioxidant that protects the heart and reduces the risk of cancer. A study at the University of California found that tomatoes left in the refrigerator for 2 to 3 days lost nearly 70% of their flavor compared to when left at room temperature. And strangely enough, most of us Americans still eat those tasteless tomatoes simply because we think refrigeration is the safest way to store them. I remember my neighbor Martha in Texas once said, "If you want your kids to eat more vegetables, never kill the natural flavor." She grows an organic tomato garden in her backyard and only picks enough tomatoes to eat in a few days. She says tomatoes should be kept at room temperature, where they can continue to ripen, sweeten, and retain their nutritional value. Of course, there are exceptions. If your tomatoes are too ripe to eat right away, putting them in the refrigerator for a few days is a temporary solution. But when you take them out, let them come back to room temperature before eating to restore some of their flavor. Here's a fun fact. Many tomatoes. Famous chefs in New York and Los Angeles absolutely do not use refrigerated tomatoes in their high-end dishes. For them, refrigerated tomatoes are dead tomatoes, soulless. And you can feel it clearly in just one bite. Avocados, the avocados and the blackened obsession. If onions and tomatoes have been familiar foods for a long time, avocados, the avocados, are the rising stars in American cuisine, especially in the past 2 decades. Americans are crazy about avocados, from guacamole at Super Bowl parties to avocado toast on Instagram by young Californians or avocado salad in healthy family dinners. I am an avocado fan too, but I used to hate the feeling of opening an avocado only to find the inside is blackened, mushy, and has a strange smell. All the money, all the excitement, gone up in smoke with just one slash of the knife. Avocados are very delicate fruits. They ripen quickly, and once ripe, they can spoil within 1 to 2 days if not stored properly. Many Americans make the mistake of putting ripe avocados in the refrigerator without covering them. The result? The flesh oxidizes, turns brown-black, and sometimes even becomes contaminated with bacteria from the refrigerator environment. Worse, some families keep half-cut avocados in the refrigerator for several days, then use them to make guacamole. I witnessed this once at a friend's house in California, and the whole group of friends had mild stomach aches after the party. It was a lesson learned. Brown avocados are not only unsightly, they can be dangerous. My mother taught me a little trick. If you want to keep half an avocado, leave the pit in the unused portion, then wrap it tightly in plastic wrap or put it in an airtight container in the refrigerator. This helps slow down the oxidation process. Some chefs also recommend squeezing a little lemon juice on the surface of the avocado to keep it green longer. We Americans love avocados for their good fats, the monounsaturated fats that help lower bad cholesterol and protect the heart. But when avocados go bad, those benefits disappear, leaving room for digestive disorders and infections. A sad paradox. General lessons: onions, tomatoes, avocados, three familiar foods in American kitchens, all carry a paradox. They are good, but if stored incorrectly, they become dangerous. And this reflects a larger truth. Sometimes, the problem lies not in what to eat, but in how we keep and use them. When I look back at my old habits, leaving onions in a damp basement, stuffing tomatoes in the refrigerator, or leaving half-cut avocados in the refrigerator, I see clearly that our family's health has been silently threatened by those small habits. And what worries me the most, there are many other, even more common, foods that are sitting in your kitchen, waiting to become silent enemies to your health. If onions, tomatoes, avocados have surprised you, then trust me, the next part will be even more horrifying. The final truth behind the fridge door. Have you ever opened your refrigerator door, looked at the vegetable trays, the plastic boxes, the sealed zip bags, and thought, here, everything is safe, good for the health of me and my family? I used to think so too, until each layer of secrets gradually revealed. Coffee stored incorrectly turns into bitter powder that harms the heart. Garlic sprouts and releases toxins. Bananas ripen black in nylon bags that damage blood sugar. Then onions, tomatoes, avocados, foods that seem harmless, turn into dangers when abused or stored incorrectly. However, this journey has not stopped. There are a few names that, when mentioned, my heart still aches because they are so familiar on American dining tables. I call them the last silent people in the refrigerator. Leafy greens, double-sided in the refrigerator. Spinach, kale, lettuce, leafy greens are a symbol of healthy eating in the US. Anyone who has ever browsed the shelves at Walmart or Costco has seen them neatly packed in clear plastic bags, printed with the words triple washed, ready to eat. Sounds safe, right? But did you know that these bags of greens have been the source of dozens of E. coli and salmonella outbreaks? I remember in 2006, the whole US was panicking because of the E. coli 0157H7 outbreak related to spinach. People rushed to return the greens, and many hospitals were full of patients with stomach aches and bloody diarrhea. The danger here is, greens are very susceptible to bacteria from the field, and even after washing them 3 times, they are still not sterile. If you leave that bag of greens in the fridge for too long, bacteria only need a temperature gap to grow. I remember a friend of mine in Texas, she always started her day with a green smoothie. One time, she bought a big bag of spinach, left it in the fridge for 2 weeks. On the outside, the leaves were still green, but after just one smoothie, she was hospitalized with food poisoning. The cold doesn't kill bacteria, it just slows them down. And when you eat them, your body is the perfect place for them to explode. Frozen berries, a sweet double-edged sword. Who doesn't love strawberries, blueberries, raspberries? In the US, bags of frozen berries are always in the freezer of families, especially for smoothies or morning oatmeal. But few people know that frozen berries are the cause of many outbreaks of hepatitis and norovirus. The reason? They are harvested in bulk, washed briefly, and then frozen immediately. Viruses do not die at sub-zero temperatures. You think you are eating healthy, but in fact, you are swallowing a pathogen. I remember in 2016, the CDC had to warn about frozen strawberries imported from Egypt, causing hepatitis in hundreds of Americans. Many people got sick from just a cup of healthy morning smoothie. I made this mistake. One day, I opened the freezer, took out an old bag of blueberries that had been stored for more than 10 months. I thought, frozen, it must be safe. But when I cooked it, the taste was bland and terrible. And more importantly, I felt my stomach churn. Turns out, a long freezing time does not mean unlimited safety. Fish, America's pride, also a refrigerator obsession. Americans love salmon, tuna, cod. Fish is a great source of protein and omega-3. But try opening the door of your freezer and looking at those frozen fish blocks. Are you sure they are still clean? The problem is, fish is very susceptible to freezer burn if you leave it too long or wrap it incorrectly. Not only does it lose its nutrients, fish can also become a haven for parasites if it is not cooked thoroughly. I remember my neighbor, Mr. Joe, a former Marine. He was always proud of the batch of Alaskan salmon his son sent home. He put it in the freezer, thinking it would last for a year. But when it was thawed, The fishy smell came out, and the fish was soft and mushy. He still tried to grill it, because he felt sorry. The consequence, his whole family had to go to the emergency room for food poisoning. The irony is, the refrigerator that we trust sometimes is the trap. The lesson after all, after many years, I realized not all healthy foods are safe forever. Coffee, garlic, bananas can become toxic when stored incorrectly. Onions, tomatoes, avocados... from nutrition turned into a burden on the liver and kidneys. Leafy greens, frozen berries, fish thought to be symbols of clean eating, healthy living, turn out to be deadly risks. It all depends on how we store them, how we respect the time of food. I remember that evening, standing in front of the refrigerator, I slowly closed the door. In silence, I asked myself, how many American families are eating the same things I used to eat, without knowing that they are gambling with their own health? Final message: if you have come this far with me, you probably have an image of your refrigerator with its old packages of vegetables, cans of fish, bags of fruit. Don't let them become silent dangers. Check them, throw them away when necessary, and more importantly, remember, healthy eating is not just about the food you choose, but also about how you store and respect it. This is my journey, and it can be yours too. But trust me, our refrigerators still have many other secrets that science has not yet named. And one day, I will tell you, the voice drops, the camera moves back, the refrigerator door closes in the darkness. If you find these stories useful, don't forget to subscribe to the channel to discover more secrets hidden behind familiar dishes. Because sometimes, what kills us is not something strange, but in our daily meals.